I'm primarily a solo war gamer, and so one of the ways I try to create a degree of uncertainty is by randomly seeing if and when units will come on the table, where they'll come on, and it does add a lot to the game. So the way that works is on a 2, 3, 4, or 5, they will be in the game, and if they're in the game, then I roll to see which entry point they'll come in on and what turn they will. So General Mordaunt's brigade, so I'm going to roll a die for him. 4, so he'll be in the game. And so the British have 2 entry points. Far into the table there is A, and this is B. 1, 2, and 3, he enters there. 4, 5, 6, he enters here. So where will he enter? He will enter on A. So I put an A for him. Mordaunt. And then what turn will he arrive? He will arrive on turn 5. Then we go on to Ligonier. He's the cavalry. He will also arrive, and he will arrive on also A. And he will arrive on turn 6. So he'll kind of come late in the game. The Dutch, under Isaac Koonstrom, will they be in the game? They will be in the game. And he will enter on entry point B. And he will arrive on turn 3. Then Lascelles, will he be in the game? He will be in the game. And he will arrive also on B. And he will be arriving on turn 2. So he'll be coming in early. Aide-de-camps are important in this game. And so will aide-de-camp 1 be in the game? He will. He will come in on B as well. And he will arrive on turn 3. Aide-de-camp 2 will be in the game. He will arrive on A. And he will arrive on turn 3. James Wolfe will be arriving, and he will be coming in on B. So that was Wolfe. And he will arrive on turn 3 as well. Colonel Montrose with the militia. Let's re-roll that. He will not be in the game. And then Chumley will also not be in the game. So they will not have those 2 brigades. General Hawley will be their leader. He's automatically going to be in the game. He will be coming in on A. And he will be coming in on turn 2. So he'll be arriving fairly early. Okay, so that's the British force. Prince Charles, Charlie, he will be entering, and again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he'll be coming in from entry point 1 on turn 1. So he'll be getting there right in the beginning of the game. John Drummond, will he be making the battle? He will, and he'll be coming in on the middle there. So that he's going to be entry point 2, Drummond. And he will be entering on turn 6, so coming in late. Aide-de-camp 1 for the Scots. He will be coming in. He'll be coming in on entry point 1. And he'll be coming in also with Prince Charlie. George Murray, will he be in the game? He will not be in the game. John MacDonald, the cavalry for the Scots. he will be coming in. He'll be coming in on, again, entry point 1. And he will be coming in on turn 3. Cavalry. The French, large contingent, will they be in the game? They will be in the game. They will be coming in on 3 over here on the right. And they'll be coming in on turn 5. Roy Stewart's Highlanders, they will be in the game. They will be coming in on also 3. And they will be arriving on turn 4. So just ahead of the French. The Duke of Perth, Lowland Brigade, they will be in the game. They're entering from the middle. So 2. And they will be arriving on turn 6. Aide-de-camp 2 is not in the game. Ogilvy is not in the game. All right. So that's how we have our forces. And so typically what I do, if they're coming in on turn 1, they're going to be on the table and able to move. And then turn 2 and 3, 4, 5, and 6, etc. And so that's how I kind of figure out who's coming on and when they're coming on. We'll mix the cards together and then start the game. Turn 1. Prince Charlie and his aide-de-camp had entered here at this, and he rolled for his activation, and he only got 1 activation, so he was only to move this far, but he wanted to be at the crossroads to have better control of the game. The commanding general and the aide-de-camp can be attached to either specific units or to brigades, which enhances their ability to activate, etc., etc. So Bonnie Prince Charlie wanted to get in a position to do that. And so now we'll move on to turn 2. Turn 2 saw General Hawley enter from the extreme left, and he got 2 activations, so he was able to get here to the middle of the table. The objective of the game is to control this town. This is a very significant town, and so both sides are contending for it. Lascelles was able to enter in turn 2, but he only was able to get 1 activation, which only gave him about just to enter literally and not really advance beyond that. So, but they definitely have the edge. They're very close to the town, and we'll see what can happen in turn 3. Turn 3 saw the government forces able to rapidly move into the town. Lascelles' brigade has done that, and then Kronstrom's Dutch following up. Wolfe's card was also drawn, but there was a logjam here, so he wasn't able to get on the table. The second aide-de-camp has kind of moved up here to keep an eye on things. And then on the far back there, you can see that MacDonald's cavalry has entered the fray. So basically just a very small cavalry brigade is all that's on the table right now to contest the sizable force that the British are being able to deploy into the town. So it looks like the Jacobites are going to have to be on the attack to try to make this a successful campaign for them. Turn 4, Stuart's cavalry's card was drawn early, but not much they could do against all that formed infantry, so they've just kind of taken position in the shelter behind those trees. Lascelles is trying to order up a line of offense because he thought that might be where the attack was coming from. And Kronstrom also kind of deployed here on the left flank. And the other half of Lascelles' brigade entered into the town and tried to get situated. And then John Roy Stuart's Highlanders have entered the fray, and their artillery is deployed, and so they are a quite formidable force. So when Wolfe's brigade came on, they are going to immediately peel off to the right to basically stabilize the right flank. And So no shots have been fired yet, as both sides are kind of entering the table, but things are taking shape, and we'll move on now to turn 5. Turn 5 was quite active. The first card to come up was John Roy Stuart's, and so his artillery was already unlimbered, and they got off of a round into Lascelles' column here, but only inflicted 1 casualty. And seeing Wolfe come on, he is trying to redeploy to kind of meet that threat. Then the next turn of events was that Dupont's French brigade, very sizable, 5 regiments, some cavalry, 2 batteries of artillery, has entered, which is very alarming to the government forces as they see that they're heavily outnumbered. When Lascelles' card came up, he got this regiment into line. The smoke indicates that they fired and have not yet reloaded, and fired into the battery and destroyed it. They took out 2 of the 4 figures, and in these rules that means the unit's destroyed. Over here, Wolfe is trying to deploy to secure the right flank of the government forces. Lascelles is trying to move his artillery back. He's trying to redeploy and take the second foot into the town. And then the aide-de-camp, one of the benefits of an aide-de-camp is they can be designated to a specific unit. So in this case, Lascelles has designated his unit to this aide-de-camp, so they'll continue to hold the road. And Kronstrom's Dutch are now going to try to take the place of Lascelles' men that are marching off. But then over here, Mordaunt, who has the largest brigade in the British Army, has entered on this table edge. He has 5 regiments, and I think 2 or 3 of them are veteran, which means they're really good. So all the other units that are not yet on the table will be coming on in turn 6, and so we'll kind of see what happens then. So first blood goes to the Scots, but then the inflictor of that was completely destroyed by a well-placed volley. So now let's move on to turn 6. Turn 6. General Mordaunt was not able to move. He was able to activate 1 unit and then rolled an 11, which means that in these rules, that's the end of his turn. And so Ligonier's cavalry, who's behind him, is not able to get on the table. They've attached an aide-de-camp to these 2 regiments so that Mordaunt's brigade will be broken up into 2 different sections. And then on the other side of the table there, you can see that a lot of reinforcements came on for the Jacobites. The Duke of Drummond and the Duke of Perth's men are coming on. In the center here, not much happened. Kronstrom basically redeployed a little bit, and Lascelles was feverishly trying to get his men in to occupy the walled feature there. Wolfe's men have deployed, and this right flank is looking very strong. The major development was that John Roy Stuart charged 2 of his clans into the 62nd Foot Badereau's regiment and had a stunning victory. Basically destroyed the unit. Lascelles attached himself to try to get more fight out of them, and he was killed in the process. And so Lascelles' command is now under the command of General Hawley. And then the Comte de Dupont got his men in to mount an attack here. He unlimbered a battery and fired it, but had no success. No damage was inflicted. But you can tell that Lascelles, it's a forlorn hope there, unless over here General Wolfe can apply some pressure and draw off some of these guys. But so that's the end of turn 6. The only units remaining to come onto the table are the British cavalry. So now on to turn 7. All right, turn 7, John Roy Stewart trying to be aggressive. The Camerons of Lochiel charged across the field into this regiment, and despite heavily outnumbering them and getting a significant bonus for charging as clansmen, they only won the combat by 1. And so it stopped the charge, and they're reinforced. Wolfe got other of his regiments up here to this hedge line. John Roy Stewart pulled back here, trying to secure his position a little bit more. The French came up and blasted away without much success. And basically they fired 2 regiments, 2 batteries of artillery. At the 1 regiment, they only inflicted 1 casualty. And then when the British got their turn to fire, they were able to inflict 3 casualties here on the Royal Écossois and 3 more casualties on this French regiment here. The aide-de-camp, General Hawley, was able to get this regiment into line finally, so it's a formidable defense. They get a bonus for being behind that stone wall, so it's going to be a challenge. Though they're outnumbered, they can put up a stiff fight. The aide-de-camp got his regiment here in line, and then the Dutch just trying to realign a little bit. The Duke of Perth, on his first activation roll, rolled a 12, meaning that that was the end of his turn. He could do nothing. So Bonnie Prince Charlie, needing to put some pressure on that flank, has attached himself to the Duke of Perth's regiment and to give them more of an advantage in terms of activating. Colonel Lord George Drummond has moved his Highlanders up here. One failed to activate and was left behind. His mortars fired at this regiment while it was still in column, and so it inflicted a casualty upon them. But then again, he rolled for this regiment and they failed to activate, meaning that, again, for the 3rd turn now, Ligonier's cavalry is not able to get on the table. So the aide-de-camp here has taken his 2 regiments of Mordaunt's group, and he's going to try to put some pressure on the flank here to stall any advances. So that's the wrap-up for turn 7. Just there's the line. There's General Hawley there in the middle of the town trying to hold it. Wolfe's men, and the other side of the charge over here. On this flank, Wolfe got the initiative first. He was able to pour some fire into the Camerons of Lochiel and basically reduced them by a quarter, so they've lost a full stand. But before he could do anything else, he lost the initiative. And when it came around to John Roy Stewart, he decided to be very aggressive and charged 3 of his clans at Barrow's regiment that was defending that ridge line. And it looked like he was going to, Stewart's men were going to have a great success, but Barrow's men fought stubbornly and only lost by 1. So they were driven back and disordered. So it's kind of a stalemate over here, but you can see that they've lost 3 figures, 3, 3, so they're getting worn down. And then over here, the French tried to apply more pressure on Lascelles' brigade here and exchanged fire, but again, it was pretty ineffective. These guys only lost 2 more casualties. These guys lost another man. But then when it came time for initiative, because this regiment was disordered and had already fired, they only got 2 axes, so they reordered and are ready to fire again. And this regiment held its fire, not wanting to, wants to take full advantage of that first fire benefit, so waiting for these guys to get into range. The Duke of Perth's men finally advanced, but then the next rolls were only one initiative, so they're still very, very slow in deploying. And Kronstrom's men trying to get into a position where they can preempt any strikes. The aide-de-camp here got 2 of Mordaunt's regiments in line, but again, only 1 activation, so that was not propitious for them. And then towards the end of the turn, Drummond charged forward his clans into Mordaunt's line here on the top of the ridge. These 2 regiments were disordered going through the farm and things like that, but even so, they were quite successful in driving back this regiment with loss. They didn't lose anybody. But these clans were not so unfortunate. Barksdale's men were the only one to close. They lost 4 men in the process. And these guys in support were disordered. And this regiment lost 3 men. And so they're holding on. And you can see they've got a battery and another regiment in support. So things are kind of evening out here, but tipping the scales in the favor of the government forces is Ligonier's 4 regiments of dragoons finally are on the table. And so they're very mobile, and they can either go to the right or really start applying pressure to Prince Charlie here in the left and the center. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next turn. So I think we're moving on to turn 9 now. Turn 9. So the first card to be drawn on this flank was Drummond's. And so the MacDonalds of Keppoch had not received any casualties yet, so they charged Pulteney's regiment here, veterans, and just blew them away. Pulteney had to roll to see if he could fire as they came in. He failed that. And in the melee, they received 6 casualties and didn't inflict any. And so the MacDonalds of Keppoch decided to hold their position and reform. And then they didn't do anything else with the others. Barksdale tried to support the charge but failed. Initiative didn't get enough to do that. So when Mordaunt's turn came up, he advanced this regiment up and fired into Keppoch and inflicted 4 casualties. The artillery now is unlimbered and ready to do some serious execution. And then the aide-de-camp sent over this regiment to get onto the flank. Ligonier is taking 3 of his regiments to assist in the defense of the village. Aide-de-camp 1 has broken himself off from the Lascelles regiment that he was commanding to take over this group of dragoons to kind of help out and stabilize this flank. The Duke of Perth's men were able to advance and fire, but didn't inflict any casualties whatsoever. And they're trying to get in line. Kronstrom sent up his regiment and issued a volley and took out 2 of Perth's men. So they're kind of solidifying their line there. And then over here, Roy Stewart, his card came up first. He wanted to charge this line, and then he rolled an 11, which in these rules means he failed the activation. That was the end of his turn. So his units remained disordered and very vulnerable. The other thing about this game is when they get to a certain level of casualties, they become worn, which makes them harder to maneuver and less effective in melee, etc., etc. It's kind of a permanent disordered marker. And because just sitting there, they received a volley from them. And then the firefight over here in the village continues. The Royal Cassois have lost a stand. This regiment fired and basically no effect. And so another French regiment moved up, was disordered through that, but then reordered, but they didn't have enough to fire. This regiment is got 5 casualties, so they're kind of getting ground down. these guys have moved up to musket range, so hopefully they'll get the first initiative and be able to take out some. And finally, the Duke of Perth is getting into the action, doing something. Here you can see Kronstrom's men, his regulars, coming up the firefight. And so the action is fast and furious. And that's the Black Watch, my favorite regiments in the Army. And so that's the end of turn 9. On this flank, Mordaunt's card came up first. He was very excited, and then before he could do anything, he rolled an 11, meaning that his brigade was inactive. The aide-de-camp here was able to slip down this regiment and fire into the flank of that column and took out 4 soldiers. And then Drummond's card came up, and he wanted to charge these guys who had already fired and had an advantage and maybe overwhelm them. He rolled a 12. Again, completely inactive. Ligonier's cavalry is continuing to march across the battlefield to the sound of the guns over here. Wolfe's men tried to charge. It was fired a volley. But in the succeeding melee, they won and inflicted enough casualties on Cameron of Lochiel's men that they had to be picked up. But then they didn't roll well for their other regiments, so they basically stayed put. But very significant force here on the flank, and John Roy Stewart he's lost his artillery, he's lost his largest regiment, and so they're just hanging on. See if they can hold that flank. Over here, the French are continuing to pound away at the wall here, the city gates, but not making as much headway as they would like. This veteran regiment here is now worn, so they're getting threadbare. These guys advanced, fired, only inflicted 1 casualty, and then they lost 3 men in the counterfire. Kronstrom's card came up first, and he fired a volley into this front regiment, didn't do any damage. Firefight here between these 2 regiments, and it's about even 3-4. These guys came up, fired, but the wall protected them, no casualties inflicted. MacDonald wanted to get his cavalry over, move them, and he rolled an 11, meaning that there was nothing else he could do for the rest of the turn. And so that turn is in the books. It's pretty much a stalemate right now. Again, the objective is the town, and the British are holding on, but just barely. So we'll move on to the next turn and see what happens. Turn 11 saw significant developments, especially here on the government left flank. The first card went to Drummond, and he charged. And in his charge, he completely destroyed the 37th Foot. But he was unsuccessful in launching a charge against the artillery. But the Glengarrys charged across the wall, disordered them, but they were able to drive back this regiment. So things were looking pretty bleak for Mordaunt. But the aide-de-camp had come and attached himself to Kingston's horse, and they countercharged and won successfully, driving back Drummond and disordering him. But because Mordaunt had lost 2 of his 3 regiments that were still under his command, these 2 had been broken off, he had to take a brigade morale test. He rolled a 1, which means that they were picked up. So this flank is very, very precarious. In the center, Perth and Kronstrom continued to exchange blows with each other, firing, and casualties are mounting. One of Perth's regiments attacked and drove back this regiment of Lassalle's. Ligonier rolled pretty well, and so his regiments were able to form a column and enter into the town. So they're going to have an opportunity to kind of hopefully relieve some pressure on Hawley and his command there. And then Wolfe was very successful in activating. He basically is moving these regiments forward. This regiment moved up, fired into Roy Stewart's men, took out more casualties, so they're really hurting. The last card drawn was Roy Stewart's, and so he basically tried to pull back. Over here, it's just a slugfest. And the French didn't roll very well. They didn't get a lot of actions and things, but the one success that they did have was this regiment went up and fired into the artillery. They inflicted 2 casualties, so now the battery's worn. This regiment is fighting very hard, and Bulkelly's regiment has now suffered 25% casualties. MacDonald finally activated his cavalry and has moved them over here to support the French. And so turn 11, very, very eventful. And I think we're getting close to a decision here as can the French break into the town, or are they going to be thwarted in their attempts? Moving on down to turn 12. Drummond tried to take advantage of his situation, follow up his victories, but didn't roll very well with his activation. So basically was able to reorganize his troops, but not really do much more than that. The one bright spot was he was able to charge with this clan, and they destroyed a regiment that was under the command of the aide-de-camp. So his unit is now under half strength, so they had to take a morale test, which he passed. Over here, this aide-de-camp tried to reclaim the situation, so he charged and was successful in his charge, but the aide-de-camp attached himself, and in these rules, if that happens, he has to take a test at the end to see if he was wounded or killed. And in this circumstance, he was wounded. He rolled a 10, or a modified 10, which is a wound, and that necessitated a morale check for his little brigade, which they somewhat passed. They rolled a 4, and that means they had to withdraw 10 inches, which was probably a good thing, because otherwise they would have been up here in a world of hurt. Comstrant is trying to stabilize the flank in case Drummond doesn't have any opposition, so he's advanced a regiment. He continues to slug it out with the Duke of Perth's men. On this flank, a lot happened. Ligonier was the first to activate, and he charged the 14th Dragoons into that French regiment, and they were basically defeated and had to retreat. Wolfe's men continued to advance, and Roy Stewart tried to pull back. These guys unfortunately were not able to and took a volley, but it wasn't a very successful volley. And then Dupont's French still applying pressure here on the town. This regiment, Regiment Berwick, charged, routed the 3rd Foot. They took out the artillery that had been whittled down by Ruth's regiment, and so General Hawley is trying to reconsolidate a line here at the end of the village, but they're taking losses. So he also had to take a morale test because he's lost half of his brigade, but being the commanding general, they passed. So we're going to go one more turn and kind of see if there's some miraculous way that the government forces can pull out a victory. But right now, it looks like the momentum is on the Jacobite side. But we'll see. Turn 13. Lots of twists and turns. Over here, Drummond tried to charge the McDonald's here, but they ended up short. Kensington rallied these wounded as he was. He rallied them. They charged. They won the charge and basically have driven back the Drummonds there. But they're worn now and just barely holding on. The other MacDonald regiment charged and hit the Black Watch in the flank, but basically was only able to win by 2. So they were driven back into the cover of the woods. The aide-de-camp attached to the Manchester regiment there, and so he's coming on to threaten the flank of Kromenstrand's men. And then Kromenstrand, the Duke of Perth, decided to get very aggressive, and so he fired and charged and added his weight to it, and even though it was basically no use, he was killed in the effort, and Kromenstrand charged. They had to take a morale test at the end of the turn, which they failed. They rolled a modified 2, which means they had to retreat 20 inches, so there they are at the far end of the table. Wolfe continued his advance to try to really press Roy Stewart. They were able to take out yet another regiment, this one of Cluny McPherson's men. But the pursuing roll, brigade morale test is they held their ground, but probably not what they wanted. Ligonier tried desperately. He led yet another charge, this time with the 10th Dragoons. And this time the French were able to get a volley off, and they won the melee, drove off the 10th Dragoons with great loss. You can see the carnage there in front of the line. And now they were at less than half strength. They had to take a morale test. They rolled a 1, so Ligonier's cavalry has departed the field. MacDonald's cavalry is on the Jacobite left flank to try to counter Wolfe's aggressiveness. Wolfe's in pretty good shape. He has one regiment that's down 25%, but the others are pretty full strength. But they have a lot of strength over here and veteran troops facing them. The French continued their sweep through the village and have driven the remnants of Lascelles' men out. They took a morale test and they passed yet again. And Kromenstrand's men, one regiment's gone, but 3 of them are still, well, actually, no, they haven't lost anybody. So they're still in the field. So I think I'm going to call the game at this point. Probably a French victory. The Drummond is a very formidable force. These are all veteran clans. Even though they're reduced, they still have enough firepower that they could do a lot of damage. The French have taken losses, but again, they're still formidable. They have 2 batteries. This battery is unlimbered and prepared to fire down the flank of one of Wolfe's regiments. So it looks like the town would be very securely in French hands by the end of 2 or 3 more turns. I think they've lost 2 of their brigades. They lost Mordaunt, they lost Ligonier, and Lascelles is just hanging on by a thread here. So and there's General Perth that was killed in the battle, leading his men bravely. The Manchester regiment on its own, these are militia, so they're not very good, but probably enough to cause a consternation on Cornstrone there. So, a very, very fun battle. I think the rules are pretty realistic, capturing the flavor of the period. And So that will wrap it up. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave a note. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd really appreciate it if you would, so you can keep up to date with me and my various projects. So thanks so much. Have a great day. Happy wargaming.